Hello friends, so in this video I'm going to talk about one of the very important JavaScript question that you must know. If you want to get the job in one of the leading companies, top companies, then you must know how to answer this question. So let's jump on the computer and then I will explain in detail. Okay, so we have got this very simple JavaScript. So we have got very simple JavaScript code right here. Just a simple for loop, and we are having three iterations 0 to 2, 0, 1, 2. And then after that this iteration ends, then console.log is there, and in the code in this particular body we have got set timeout, and we are calling this function basically after 5 seconds. So in the interview they will ask you like what will be the output of this particular code, and if you answer it correctly and you give the explanation properly, then nobody can stop you from getting your job, because this question is about a lot of things are covered in this. There is a fare, there is a set timeout, there is a callback function, and also something to do with synchronous and asynchronous programming in JavaScript. So just give it a thought and then let me know what will be the output of this particular code. Now some of you might say like the output will be 0, 1, 2, and then end of script. And some of you might say end of script 0, 1, 2. Okay, so what will be the correct output? So the output of this particular program will be none of these. Okay, so output of this program will be this one, end of script 3, 3 and 3. Okay, now I'm sure you might have confused. It is very confusing, I know, but let me explain you how this code is working. So first of all, let us clear this doubt. Why it is printing end of script before printing numbers? So this is because of the asynchronous and synchronous programming. So what happens is that in JavaScript, the set timeout is a asynchronous code. So what it means is that this callback function will be pushed to the event loop, and then that will get executed after 5 seconds. And the JavaScript engine doesn't stop there. It executes the rest of the code, like the for loop is there. So it will execute all the iterations, and then it will also execute this statement as well. So everything it will execute, like all the synchronous part of the code will be executed, and that is why it runs these iterations in the for loop. And then since there is nothing to be printed, because remember that this callback function is gonna be called after 5 seconds, so it will print this thing first and then it will print the numbers. Now in the numbers itself, 5 is printing 3, 3, 3 instead of 0, 1, 2. So I will explain that in little bit, before that let me also execute this particular code and then show you what's happening. Come here, you can see it printed end of script, and then it will print 3, 3, 3. As we say, after 5 seconds it has printed 3 times, because our loop is for 3 iterations. So I will explain you how it is working, but before that let me also talk about fare and let. So remember that we had this variable index declared with the fare. Now let us declare with the let. Now what will be the output? So this time around output will be end of script and then 0, 1 and 2. Now this might be very confusing to you, like in case of fare, this is how the output is gonna look like. In case of let, this is how the output is gonna look like. Let me quickly execute this code. So as you can see, it printed end of script. So here is what's happening in this code. So first of all, we will consider this fare, and then we will consider the let. So let us imagine that this index is initialized with declared with fare. So in that case, what happens? So what happens is in the first iteration index is 0, and in here interesting thing is happening in the body of this particular for loop. So set timeout is getting called, and the first argument is the function. So basically what is happening is that we are passing the reference of this callback function to set timeout, and when we pass the reference of the function, what happens is that the lexical environment associated with that function is also remembered. Okay, it is stored memory called as heap. The reason why it is stored is because when we pass the reference of the function, that function will be called later on. So in this case, that function is going to be called after 5 seconds, because we have given here 5000 milliseconds. That means 5 seconds. So here the lexical environment is index. Okay, so index will be stored. So remember that index value is 0, but it doesn't remembers the value. Okay, it just remembers the memory location. Okay, so right now in the first iteration index value is 0. It doesn't print anything. In the next iteration index value becomes 0. Okay, and another callback function reference is being passed, but this time around lexical environment is also being remembered. But remember that index was already stored by the callback function 1 in the first iteration, and it was referring to this memory location. The second callback function is also referring to the same memory location. Okay, that is very important to know in case of var. So in case of var, what happens is that all these callback functions are storing the same, like remembering the same memory location. But the problem what is happening here is that since this for loop is iterating, the index value is changing, right? The memory location is same, index value is changing. So at the end of this iteration, index value will be 3, because 3 iterations will happen, 0, 1, 2, and at the end of this iteration like for loop, index value will be 3, and then it comes here, it prints the console.log end of script. So this is the first thing that will be printed, because these callback functions will get executed later on. This console.log is a synchronous function, so it will get printed, and after 5 seconds what will happen is that the first callback function will get executed. The first callback function it knows the lexical environment, right? It remembers the memory location of index. Memory location of index is M0, for example, and then it accesses the value. So it once it knows the memory location, it's very simple, it accesses the value. But remember that value has already changed to 3, because this for loop has already executed, and the value of that index is now 3, and that's why it prints 3. Same thing happens with the callback function 2 as well, and callback function 3 as well, because they are referring to the same memory location. So it is very important to note that it is referring to the same memory location in case of var. Now let us come back to the late. So late is the block scoped variable. So in this case what is happening is that here also we are calling the set timeout in the first iteration, and then when we pass the reference, so this callback function reference is being passed. So it also, since it is a function, it needs to remember the lexical environment. So it remembers this index, but remember that this time around what is happening is late is a block scoped variable. So what happens is that in the first iteration it gets the memory location, for example M1. Okay, it gets the memory location M1, and it is remembered. In the next iteration what happens is that, and also in the first iteration the index value is 0. In the next iteration again another reference is being passed, this callback function reference is being passed, but this time around instead of this M1, let us say another memory location is created. So since it is a block scope, okay, since it is a block scope, index is a block scope, what happens is that fresh memory location is being created, and this is where the difference is there, like in var and late. In var what is happening is memory location is same, right? But in block, since it is declared with a late, what happens is that in each iteration this index, new index memory location will be created, and in that the value will be stored. So this index is completely different from this index where the callback function to reference is being passed. right? In the second iteration, this particular index variable is same, but the memory location is different. I hope we understand what I'm saying. And then in the next callback function 3, in the third iteration also, what is happening is fresh index is being created, and it is stored in the different memory location. So each of these callbacks have got different memory locations, and it is lexical environments. So index, even though the variable name is same, the memory locations are different, and since memory locations are different, the values are also different, because at that point of time when this function reference was passed, index values, whatever values of the index were, that will be remembered. For example, in the first iteration, m1 or this index will be stored 0, second it will be stored in 1, and in the third callback function it will store 3. And that's why in this case what happens is that it prints end of script as usual, because set timeout is a asynchronous function, but at the after 5 seconds it will print 0, 1 and 2, because it is referring different memory locations m1, m2, m3. And coming back to the var, you can see that all the functions are remembering the lexical environment, but the thing is that it is this index variable, it is not getting created separately in each iteration of the loop, and that is the crux of this particular thing. If you understand that different memory locations are created in the late iterations, and in the var iterations same memory location is being referenced, then it will be very easy to understand this thing. If you would like to see more videos on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js, Express, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel. I'll see you in next video. Till then, enjoy your time.